Tonight, the boundaries between present and past dissolve like pigment in warm oil. Feel the air heavy with marble dust and the sweet perfume of pine resin that permeates every board of this Florentine bottega. If this journey touches your soul, join us again and whisper from where you listen to us. Now, dim the lights, breathe deeply. Let us dream with memories that are not our own. I awaken before even the bells of Santa Maria del Fiore announce the first prayers. My bare feet know every creaking board of this bottega, every step that leads me to the sanctum sanctorum where colors are born. The air still carries the chill of the Florentine dawn, but my hands already warm with anticipation of the sacred work that awaits me. The bottega sleeps around me like an ancestral creature. In the shadows I glimpse familiar contours, canvases stretched, awaiting the first brush stroke. Brushes organized by size like soldiers in formation. And there, at the center of everything, my work table where magic happens. The scent of linen prepared with gesso mingles with the persistent aroma of linseed oil, creating an olfactory symphony that is, for me, more comforting than any garden perfume. I light the first candle with hands that tremble not from cold, but from reverence. The flame dances, casting shadows that seem to bring life to the saints painted on the walls. They are the ones who watch me work day after day, silent witnesses to a tradition that extends through generations. My master, who learned from one who learned from Giotto, used to say that each pigment carries the soul of whoever prepared it. Today, as dawn approaches, I feel the weight of that responsibility on my shoulders. The ritual always begins the same. First, I check that the grinding stones are clean, the Carrara marble that my grandfather brought personally from the quarries, polished until it shines like a mirror. Any residue from previous colors can contaminate the day's work, transforming a celestial blue into a melancholy gray. I run my fingers over the cold surface, feeling every microscopic imperfection that could interfere with perfect grinding. The oyster shells, carefully selected and cleaned, await in ordered rows. Each will receive a different color, like small cradles where pigments will rest until called to life. Some still hold the salty perfume of the sea, a memory of their aquatic origin that in some mysterious way seems to bless the colors that form within them. As I organize the instruments, my mind wanders through learned lessons. The preparation of pigments is not merely technique, it is alchemy. It is prayer. It is communion with the masters who came before me. Each movement must be precise, each proportion exact. An error in mixing can ruin not only the color, but an entire work that will take months to complete. The candlelight projects my shadow on the wall, and for a moment I see not just my silhouette, but that of all the artisans who worked in this same space. We are links in a golden chain that extends through centuries, each passing forward the secrets they received, each adding their own discovery to the common treasure. Outside, Florence still sleeps. The narrow streets guard the silence of dawn, broken only by the distant echo of horse hooves on stones. But here, in the intimacy of the bottega, the day has already begun, and with it the eternal dance between light and color, between tradition and creation, between the human and the divine. The first pale rays of sunlight begin to filter through the high windows, painting golden rectangles on the wooden floor. This is the moment I have been waiting for, when natural light begins its daily transformation of my workspace. In candlelight, colors lie. They whisper false promises, show faces that daylight will cruelly expose as deceptions. But in this precious hour, as dawn breaks over the terracotta roofs of Florence, I can trust what my eyes see. I move to the great chest where my treasures are kept. Each drawer holds wonders that merchants have carried across continents. Cinnabar from distant Spain, ultramarine made from lapis lazuli that traveled the Silk Roads from Afghanistan, orpiment that glows like captured sunlight. My fingers trace the labels written in my master's careful script, each name a poem in itself. Vermilion, malachite, realgar, each syllable heavy with history and possibility. The wooden handles of my tools feel warm beneath my palms, worn smooth by countless hands before mine. The mullah, that cone-shaped stone that will dance with the marble slab in the ancient choreography of color creation, sits heavy in my grip. It knows its purpose as surely as I know mine. Together we will transform raw earth into divine hues, crushing crystalline dreams into powders fine enough to capture the very essence of light itself. In the corner, my collection of mortars and pestles stands ready. Bronze for the softer pigments, agate for those that demand more persuasion, iron for the stubborn minerals that must be coaxed into submission. Each vessel bears the patina of age, the accumulated wisdom of countless preparations. Sometimes I imagine I can hear whispers from within their depths, the voices of all the colors they have birthed over the decades. The air grows warmer as the sun climbs higher, and with it comes the familiar symphony of Florence awakening. Somewhere in the distance, a baker's oven roars to life, sending the aroma of fresh bread drifting through my windows. Cartwheels rumble over cobblestones as merchants begin their daily pilgrimage to the markets. But these sounds feel distant, muffled, as if the bottega exists in its own sacred bubble of time and space.
I pause at the window, watching the light change from the deep gold of early morning to the clearer, more honest illumination that will guide my work. The shadows shift and dance across my workspace, and I know that in just moments the true work will begin. The pigments wait patiently in their containers, each one a sleeping giant of color, ready to awaken at my touch and transform into something greater than the sum of its earthly parts. This is the hour of possibility, when the day stretches ahead like a blank canvas, when every color holds infinite potential, when the very air seems to hum with creative energy. In this moment, I am not just an artisan grinding pigments. I am a keeper of ancient secrets, a translator of light into language, a bridge between the divine inspiration that flows through my master's brush and the humble materials that make such miracles possible.
The marble slab calls to me like an old friend, its surface cool and expectant beneath the growing light. I approach it with the reverence of a priest approaching an altar, for in many ways that is exactly what this is. A sacred space where transformation occurs, where the mundane becomes miraculous through patience and skill. My hands know this ritual by heart, yet each morning feels like the first time. I select the day's first pigment with careful deliberation. Today it will be ochre, that humble earth that has served artists since the caves of Lascaux. The raw material sits in its leather pouch, unassuming lumps of clay-colored stone that betray nothing of their potential. But I know better. I have seen what these modest fragments can become when treated with proper respect. The grinding begins slowly, almost meditatively. The muller moves in gentle circles, its weight distributed evenly across the marble surface. Too much pressure, and the pigment becomes coarse, gritty, unsuitable for the delicate work ahead. Too little, and it remains stubbornly granular, refusing to yield its secrets. The rhythm must be just so, a dance learned through years of practice, muscle memory, encoded in my very bones. As I work, the ochre begins its metamorphosis. What started as rough chunks gradually becomes powder, then finer powder, then something approaching the consistency of silk. The color deepens and enriches with each pass of the muller, revealing hidden depths that were invisible in the raw stone. This is the first magic of the morning, watching earth transform into something worthy of capturing divine light. The sound of grinding fills the bottega with its steady whisper, a percussion that has echoed through these walls for decades. Sometimes I imagine I can hear the ghosts of other mullers, other hands, other mornings when apprentices like myself stood at this same marble slab, learning the patience that this craft demands. The rhythm becomes hypnotic, almost prayer-like, and I find my breathing synchronizing with the circular motion of my hands. Sunlight streams more boldly through the windows now, illuminating motes of pigment dust that dance in the air like tiny spirits. Each particle catches the light differently, some glowing like miniature suns, others absorbing the rays and glowing with inner fire. The bottega fills with this golden haze, and I breathe it in, feeling as though I am inhaling color itself, becoming one with the very essence of my craft. The ochre reaches the perfect consistency, fine as flour, smooth as silk, yet somehow still alive with potential energy. I gather it carefully with a palette knife, transferring the precious powder to one of my waiting shells. Even this simple act requires attention. A careless movement could scatter hours of work to the four winds, leaving me to begin again with fresh stone and wounded pride.
But ochre is just the beginning. The day's palette demands a symphony of colors, each requiring its own particular approach, its own secret knowledge. I turn next to the vermilion, that prince among reds, made from cinnabar that has traveled further than most men ever will. The mercury-based pigment demands respect. Too much heat from friction, and it can darken irreversibly, transforming from brilliant scarlet to muddy brown in the space of a heartbeat. The vermilion requires a different touch, a lighter hand. Where ochre welcomed firm pressure, cinnabar must be coaxed, seduced into submission. I adjust my grip on the muller, soften my movements, let the stone do most of the work while I guide it in ever smaller circles. The red powder spreads across the marble like spilled wine, staining the white surface with its intensity. As I work, my mind drifts to the stories this pigment could tell. Somewhere in distant Spain, miners descended into dark tunnels to extract the ore from which this color was born. Merchants loaded it onto ships that braved storms and pirates to bring it to Italian ports. Traders haggled over its price in crowded marketplaces, knowing that artists would pay handsomely for such quality. And now it rests beneath my muller, ready to become part of something eternal. The light continues to change as I work, growing stronger and more direct. This is crucial. The quality of illumination affects everything about color preparation. What appears perfect in candlelight may prove inadequate in the honest light of day. What seems too intense in morning sun may fade to nothing by afternoon. A master colorist learns to read light like a scholar reads Latin, understanding its moods and variations, its promises and deceptions. I pause in my grinding to examine the vermilion more closely, holding a pinch of the powder up to catch the light. The particles glitter like tiny rubies, each one a perfect crystal of pure color. This is what separates the master from the apprentice, the ability to see not just color, but the quality of color, the life within it, the potential it holds for bringing paintings to vivid reality. The morning air grows warmer now, carrying with it the sounds of Florence coming fully awake. Voices drift up from the street below, merchants calling their wares, children laughing as they run to morning lessons, the clip-clop of horses pulling carts loaded with goods from the countryside. But these sounds feel distant, muffled by the concentration required for my work. The bottega exists in its own bubble of focused attention, where time moves differently and the outside world fades to insignificance. My hands move with practiced efficiency now.
the morning stiffness worked out through repetitive motion. The muller feels like an extension of my arm, the marble slab like a familiar friend. This is meditation in motion, prayer made physical, the ancient dialogue between human intention and natural material that lies at the heart of all true craftsmanship.
The moment arrives when I must approach the most precious of all pigments, the ultramarine that waits in its silk-wrapped bundle like a sleeping prince. My hands pause above the package, trembling slightly, not from the morning chill, but from the weight of what I am about to handle. Each grain of this celestial blue costs more than most men earn in a month, ground from lapis lazuli that has journeyed from the mountains of Afghanistan through countless hands to reach this humble bottega. I unwrap the silk with the care of a mother undressing her newborn child. The raw lapis lazuli reveals itself in all its glory, deep blue shot through with veins of gold pyrite that catch the morning light like captured stars. The stone seems to pulse with inner life, as if it remembers the ancient seas where it was born, the pressure and heat that transformed ordinary rock into this miracle of color. The preparation of ultramarine is not mere grinding. It is a ritual that has remained unchanged for centuries, passed down through whispered instructions from master to apprentice. First, the stone must be heated gently, not enough to damage its crystalline structure, but sufficient to make it more receptive to the work ahead. I place the fragments in a small bronze pan and hold it over the flame of my oil lamp, watching as the blue deepens and the golden veins seem to flow like liquid metal. The heated stone goes into my finest mortar, one carved from a single piece of agate, its surface polished to mirror smoothness. The pestle, worn to perfect balance by generations of use, begins its slow dance. Unlike the vigorous grinding required for earthier pigments, lapis lazuli demands patience, gentleness, almost a lover's touch. Too much force and the precious crystals shatter incorrectly, losing their ability to reflect light with that particular intensity that makes ultramarine the king of blues. As I work, the stone gradually yields its secrets. The first powder is coarse, mixed with impurities that must be carefully separated. I add a few drops of the finest olive oil, just enough to bind the particles without dulling their brilliance. The mixture becomes a paste, dark and rich, that I work with my fingers as much as with tools. This is where experience matters most, feeling the texture change, sensing when the pigment is ready for the next stage. The purification process is an art unto itself. I prepare a bath of warm water mixed with a precise amount of lye soap, stirring it until the solution reaches the perfect consistency. Not too thick to trap the pigment, not too thin to separate it properly. The paste goes into this bath, and now begins the most delicate part of the entire process. With clean hands, I knead the mixture under water, working it like bread dough, but with infinitely more care. The water begins to turn blue as the finest particles of ultramarine separate
from the coarser material. This first extraction yields the most precious grade, the blue that will be reserved for the virgin's robes, for the sky in the most important commissions, for details that must glow with divine light. The process continues through multiple washings, each one yielding a slightly less intense but still valuable grade of blue. The second washing gives ultramarine suitable for secondary figures, the third for backgrounds, the fourth for mixing with other colors. Nothing is wasted. Even the final palest extraction has its uses in the careful economy of the artist's palette. I watch the blue swirl in the water like liquid sky, and for a moment I am transported beyond the confines of the bottega. I see the Afghan mountains where this stone was born, feel the desert winds that carried the caravans bearing it westward, hear the voices of the merchants who traded it in the bazaars of Constantinople. Each grain of this pigment carries within it the story of the world, the vast network of human endeavor that brings beauty from the ends of the earth to this single room in Florence. The morning light has grown stronger now, streaming through the windows with increasing intensity. This is the light I have been waiting for. Clear, honest, revealing. In this illumination, I can see the true quality of my ultramarine, judge its purity, assess its potential. The blue seems to glow from within, as if it has captured some essence of the sky itself and holds it prisoner in crystalline form. I transfer the finest grade to a special shell, one I reserve only for ultramarine, polished and cleaned with obsessive care. The blue settles into its temporary home like a pool of liquid heaven, so intense it almost hurts to look at directly. This is the color that will make angels seem to float, that will give depth to painted skies, that will transform flat surfaces into windows onto the divine. But ultramarine is temperamental, demanding not just in its preparation, but in its use. It cannot be mixed carelessly with other pigments. Some combinations cause it to fade. Others make it turn gray or green. It requires specific binding agents, particular techniques of application. The knowledge of how to use it properly is as valuable as the pigment itself, passed down through generations of masters who learned through costly mistakes and hard-won experience. As I work with this precious material, I am acutely aware of my place in the great chain of artistic tradition. Somewhere in the past, an unknown craftsman first discovered that this particular stone could yield such extraordinary color.
Others learned to refine the process, to extract every possible grain of blue from the raw material. Masters developed techniques for using it effectively, from making it sing in harmony with other colors. And now I am the temporary custodian of this knowledge, responsible for preserving it and passing it forward to the next generation. The ultramarine preparation complete, I sit back for a moment to admire my work. The shell holds what appears to be a fragment of sky made solid, a piece of heaven brought down to earth through human skill and patience. Tomorrow this blue will become part of something greater, a painting that will outlive me, outlive my children, perhaps outlive the very walls of this bottega. In that painting, this blue will continue to glow with the same intensity it shows now, carrying forward the light of this Florence morning into centuries yet unborn.
The soft shuffle of bare feet on wooden stairs announces Giovannino's arrival before I see him. My youngest apprentice appears in the doorway like a ghost materializing from shadow, his dark hair tousled with sleep, eyes still heavy with dreams. At 14, he possesses that particular combination of eagerness and clumsiness that marks all beginners. Yet there is something in his careful movements around the pigments that suggests he may one day understand their deeper mysteries. "Maestro," he whispers, as if speaking too loudly might disturb the colors themselves. "Shall I prepare the eggs?" I nod, watching as he moves toward the corner where we keep our supplies. Giovannino has been with us only 6 months, but already he shows promise. His hands, though still uncertain, treat each material with the reverence it deserves. He understands, perhaps instinctively, that we are not merely mixing paints, but participating in an ancient alchemy that transforms the mundane into the miraculous. The boy selects eggs with the care of a jeweler choosing gems, holding each one up to the growing light to check for cracks or imperfections. A flawed egg can ruin an entire batch of tempera, introducing weakness into the binding medium that will cause colors to fade or flake away from the panel. He has learned this lesson through bitter experience. I still remember the morning he wept over a ruined batch of vermilion, tears mixing with the scattered red powder on the floor. "Tell me again about the proportions," I say, not because I doubt his knowledge, but because repetition is the mother of mastery. In this craft there is no room for approximation, no forgiveness for careless measurement. 1 part yolk to 1 part pigment for the base, he recites, his voice gaining confidence as he speaks. But ochre takes more binding and ultramarine less. Vermilion needs the white of the egg as well as the yolk, but never with the blues. They turn muddy. Good, he remembers. But memory is only the beginning. True understanding comes through the hands, through the countless repetitions that teach the body what the mind has learned. I watch as he separates the first egg with practiced movements.
the golden yolk sliding intact into a clean bowl, while the white disappears into another container. Nothing is wasted in the bottega. Even the egg whites have their uses in preparing grounds or cleaning brushes. The morning ritual continues as other apprentices arrive. Marco, 17 and already showing the steady hands of a future master, begins preparing the wooden panels that will receive today's work. His movements are economical, efficient, born of 3 years' experience in this same room. He knows without being told which panels need additional coats of gesso, which are ready for the first sketches, which await the final layers of paint.
Young Pietro, barely 12 and newest to our workshop, tends the fire that keeps our materials at the proper temperature. His job seems simple, but it requires constant attention. Too much heat and the delicate balances we create are destroyed. Too little and the pigments refuse to bind properly. He feeds the flames with small pieces of seasoned wood, watching the coals with the intensity of a scholar reading ancient texts. The bottega fills with the quiet sounds of purposeful work, the gentle scraping of palette knives, the soft whisper of brushes being cleaned and sorted, the almost inaudible sigh of pigment settling into its binding medium. These are the sounds of creation in its earliest stages, the humble preparations that make possible the miracles that will emerge from our workshop. Giovannino approaches with his prepared tempera, holding the bowl as if it contains liquid gold. In a sense, it does. The perfect marriage of pigment and binder that will allow color to adhere to panel, to maintain its intensity through centuries of viewing, to carry forward the vision of the master into an uncertain future. He has learned to read the consistency by sight and touch, to know when the mixture achieves that perfect balance between fluidity and body. "The ochre is ready, maestro," he announces, setting the bowl carefully on my work table. The color within glows with warm life, rich as autumn earth, steady as the foundations of the world itself. This humble brown will become the flesh tones of saints, the shadows that give form to divine faces, the subtle gradations that transform flat surfaces into convincing illusions of three-dimensional reality. I dip a clean brush into the mixture, testing its flow across a scrap of prepared panel. The paint moves smoothly, neither too thick nor too thin, leaving behind a trail of color that seems to glow with inner light. Perfect. The boy has learned well, though he does not yet understand the full significance of what he has accomplished. In time, perhaps, he will come to appreciate the miracle of this moment, when raw earth becomes the medium through which human vision touches the divine. The other apprentices gather around, drawn by the sight of the first successful mixture of the day. They watch with the intensity of acolytes witnessing a sacred ritual,
understanding that they are seeing something both utterly ordinary and completely magical. This is how knowledge passes from one generation to the next, not through written words, but through observed actions, through the patient repetition of ancient techniques, through the gradual accumulation of wisdom that comes only through practice.
Remember, I tell them, my voice carrying the weight of lessons learned through decades of experience. The pigment is only sleeping until we wake it with the proper medium. Our job is not to force it into submission, but to coax it into revealing its true nature. Each color has its own personality, its own requirements, its own gifts to offer. Learn to listen to what they tell you. The boys nod solemnly, though I know the true understanding will come only through their own mistakes, their own discoveries, their own moments of triumph and despair. This is the way it has always been, the way it must always be. Knowledge earned through struggle is knowledge that endures. Wisdom purchased with failure is wisdom that guides truly. As the morning progresses, the bottega transforms from a place of preparation into a workshop of active creation. The pigments, properly prepared and waiting in their shells, seem to pulse with anticipation. Soon they will be called into service, transformed from mere colored powder into the substance of dreams made visible, of visions given form, of the ineffable made manifest through human skill and divine inspiration. The palette becomes my altar as I begin the sacred dance of color mixing. Each pigment waits in its shell like a sleeping spirit, ready to awaken at my touch and join with its companions in harmonies that will sing across centuries. The morning light has reached that perfect clarity where truth reveals itself without shadow or deception, and I know that what I create now will hold its integrity long after these hands have turned to dust. I begin with the flesh tones, that most challenging of all color families, where the slightest miscalculation can transform a saint into a corpse, an angel into a demon. The base is ochre, that faithful earth that has served artists since time immemorial. But ochre alone is death. It requires the kiss of vermilion to bring it to life, the whisper of white to give it luminosity, the breath of umber to grant it depth. My brush moves between the shells with the precision of a musician's fingers on harp strings. A touch of vermilion here, not too much, for flesh that burns with too much red speaks of fever rather than health. A caress of white there, but carefully, for too much and the skin becomes that of a corpse rather than a living being. The colors swirl together on my palette, creating new hues that exist nowhere in nature, yet somehow capture the essence of life itself. The mixing is not mere combination, but transformation. As the pigments blend, they create something greater than the sum of their parts. a color that breathes, that suggests the warm blood flowing beneath translucent skin, that hints at the divine spark animating mortal flesh. This is the first miracle of painting, the ability to create life from lifeless materials, to suggest the infinite complexity of creation through the careful marriage of simple elements. Giovannino watches from his corner, grinding fresh pigments with steady rhythm, but I can feel his attention divided between his work and mine. He is learning not just through his own practice, but through observation, absorbing the subtle lessons that cannot be taught through words alone. The way I hold my brush, the angle at which I approach the palette, the rhythm of my mixing, all of these carry information that will serve him when he faces his own blank panels. The flesh tone complete, I turn to the blues that will clothe the Virgin in celestial glory. Here the ultramarine I prepared earlier comes into its own. But even this prince among pigments cannot stand alone. It requires companions, a touch of white to create the highlights where divine light strikes the fabric, a whisper of umber to suggest the shadows where the cloth falls into mysterious depths.
As I work, the colors seem to take on lives of their own. The blue deepens and lightens, shifts and flows, creating gradations that suggest not just fabric, but the very essence of heavenly garment. Each mixture is a small poem written in pigment, a verse in the larger epic that will emerge when brush meets panel and vision becomes reality. The morning air grows thick with the perfume of creation, linseed oil warming in the growing heat, the earthy scent of ground minerals, the sharp tang of egg tempera binding pigment to purpose. These are the incenses of our particular devotion, the aromatics that accompany our daily prayers to the gods of color and light. Marco approaches with a question about the green he is mixing for landscape backgrounds. His combination of malachite and yellow ochre has produced something muddy rather than vibrant, and frustration creases his young brow. I set aside my own work to examine his mixture, seeing immediately where he has gone astray. Too much ochre, I diagnose, and not enough patience. Green is the most temperamental of colors. It demands to be courted, not conquered. Start again, but this time add the yellow grain by grain, watching how it changes the blue. Stop the moment you see life enter the mixture. He nods and returns to his work, but I know he will make the same mistake several more times before his hands learn what his mind now understands. This is the way of learning. Knowledge must travel from head to heart to hands, and each stage of the journey takes its own time, demands its own price in failed attempts and hard-won wisdom. The palette before me now holds a rainbow of possibilities, each color perfectly balanced, each mixture singing in harmony with its neighbors. But this is only the beginning. These colors must now be applied with skill and understanding, layered and blended to create the illusion of three-dimensional reality on flat surfaces, to suggest depth and volume through nothing more than variations in hue and tone.
The first stroke is always the most crucial. It sets the tone for everything that follows, establishes the relationship between artist and surface that will govern the entire work. I load the brush with flesh tone, feeling the paint settle into the bristles, sensing its weight and consistency. Too much, and it will blob onto the panel. Too little, and it will drag and skip, leaving gaps in what should be smooth transitions. The brush touches the prepared panel with the gentleness of a lover's caress, leaving behind a stroke of color that seems to glow with inner light. This is the moment of transformation, when pigment becomes painting, when craft transcends into art. The color sits on the white ground like a living thing, warm and vital, suggesting depths that exist only in the viewer's imagination, yet feel more real than reality itself. Around me, the bottega hums with quiet activity. Apprentices grind pigments, prepare panels, clean brushes, tend fires, all the humble tasks that make possible the moments of transcendence when vision becomes visible. We are all part of a great collaboration that extends beyond this room, beyond this moment, connecting us to every artist who has ever mixed pigment with binding medium and dared to believe that colored earth could capture the divine.
The sun climbs higher, and with it comes the transformation I have been waiting for. That magical hour when Florence's dawn light reaches its perfect clarity. This is not the harsh illumination of midday that flattens all subtlety, nor the deceptive glow of candlelight that promises what it cannot deliver. This is the golden hour of truth, when colors reveal their deepest secrets and the eye can trust what it sees. I pause in my work to observe this daily miracle. The light streams through the tall windows of the bottega, no longer the pale whisper of early morning, but a confident declaration of day. It strikes my palette with scientific precision, revealing nuances in my mixed colors that were invisible moments before. The flesh tone I prepared shows new depths, subtle variations that will allow me to model the curve of a cheek, the hollow of a temple, the gentle swell where life pulses beneath skin. This light is why we begin our work before dawn, why we rise in darkness and prepare in shadow. Only in these precious hours can we see color as it truly is, unfiltered by the atmospheric veils that cloud vision at other times. The merchants in the market below may curse the early hour, but we artists know that light is our most precious commodity, more valuable than the finest ultramarine, more essential than the steadiest hand. I hold up a sample of my vermilion mixture to catch the morning rays, watching as the red seems to ignite from within. In candlelight, this same mixture appeared flat, lifeless. Under the noon sun, it will seem harsh, aggressive. But here, in this perfect illumination, It glows with the warmth of life itself, ready to become the blush on a saint's cheek, the glow of divine love made visible in pigment and oil. The quality of light affects not just how we see colors, but how we mix them. What appears perfectly balanced in artificial illumination may prove woefully inadequate when viewed in natural light. I have learned through bitter experience to trust only this morning clarity, to make my final adjustments only when the sun has reached this optimal angle. Too many paintings have been ruined by colors mixed in deceptive light, their flaws revealed only when it was too late to correct them. Giovannino approaches with a question about the blue he is preparing for sky backgrounds. In the growing light, his mixture appears too gray, lacking the celestial quality that sky demands. I examine his work, seeing immediately that he has been too generous with the white, too cautious with the precious ultramarine. Remember, I tell him, the sky is not merely blue. It is the dwelling place of angels, the throne room of the divine. It must glow with inner light, suggest depths beyond human comprehension. Your mixture speaks of earthly concerns, not heavenly glory.
He nods, understanding flickering in his young eyes. This is one of the hardest lessons for apprentices to learn, that we paint not what we see, but what we know. Not the literal truth, but the spiritual reality that lies beneath surface appearances. The sky in our paintings must be more blue than any earthly sky, just as our saints must be more beautiful than any mortal face. The light continues its subtle transformation as I work, each moment bringing new revelations. Colors that seemed perfectly matched suddenly show slight discrepancies. Mixtures that appeared complete reveal themselves as needing just a touch more of this pigment or that. This is the hour of fine-tuning, when the gross work of preparation gives way to the delicate adjustments that separate the master from the apprentice. I adjust my flesh tone with a whisper of yellow ochre, watching as the mixture comes alive under the strengthening light. The color now suggests not just skin, but living skin, warm with circulating blood, touched by the divine spark that animates all creation. This is what we strive for in every mixture, not mere representation, but transfiguration, the elevation of the mundane into the realm of the sacred. The bottega around me has settled into the rhythm of serious work. The apprentices have learned to read the light as I do, to understand that this is the crucial hour when decisions are made that will affect the final painting. Their movements become more deliberate, their attention more focused. Even young Pietro, tending his fire, seems to sense the heightened importance of this moment. Through the windows, I can see Florence awakening to another day. Smoke rises from chimneys as households kindle their morning fires. Shutters open to release the night's accumulated shadows. The city stretches and yawns, preparing for the commerce and conversation that will fill the hours ahead. But here in the bottega, we exist in a different time, governed not by the clock, but by the quality of light, not by human schedules, but by the demands of our craft. I return to my palette, making final adjustments to the colors that will soon become part of something eternal. Each mixture must be perfect, for there will be no second chances once the painting begins in earnest. The pigments I prepare this morning will carry forward the vision of my master, will speak to viewers centuries hence in the same voice they speak to me now. The light reaches its peak clarity, that moment of perfect balance when all colors show their true nature. This is the light that reveals truth, that strips away deception, that shows things as they really are rather than as they appear to be. In this illumination, I can see not just the colors on my palette, but their potential, their destiny, the roles they will play in the great work that awaits. I breathe deeply, filling my lungs with air perfumed by pigment and possibility. This is the moment I live for, when preparation transforms into creation, when the humble materials of earth become the medium through which divine vision enters the world. The morning light blesses my work, sanctifies my efforts, transforms this simple room into a temple where miracles are not just possible, but inevitable. The colors wait, patient and ready. The light shines, clear and true. The moment has arrived when vision must become reality, when the dreams that dance in my master's mind must take form on wood and canvas. This is the hour of creation, blessed by Florence's perfect dawn light, made possible by the ancient wisdom of pigment and binding medium, guided by hands that have learned to serve something greater than themselves.
In the growing warmth of the morning light, I feel the presence of those who came before me, as surely as I feel the brush in my hand. The very walls of this bottega seem to pulse with accumulated memory. Decades of artists who stood where I stand now, who mixed pigments with the same reverence, who understood that we are not merely craftsmen, but custodians of something sacred that flows through time like a river of light. My master's master once told him that Giotto himself had worked in this very room, back when the bottega was young and Florence was just beginning to dream of the artistic revolution that would transform the world. I cannot verify this claim, but I feel its truth in my bones. The marble slab where I grind my pigments bears the subtle depressions worn by countless mullers, the accumulated weight of generations pressing color into submission. Each morning, as I begin my work, I place my hands where other hands have rested, continue conversations begun centuries ago. The ghost of Giotto seems particularly present this morning, perhaps drawn by the quality of light that streams through our windows. I imagine him standing beside me, watching as I prepare the ultramarine that will clothe his painted saints, nodding approval at the care with which I separate the finest particles from the coarser ones. He understood, as I am learning to understand, that every grain of pigment carries within it the potential for transcendence. There is a rhythm to this work that connects me to all who have practiced it. The circular motion of the muller on marble, the gentle scraping of palette knife against shell, the soft whisper of brush through binding medium. These sounds have echoed through this space for so long that they seem to have soaked into the very wood of the walls, creating a symphony of accumulated effort that plays constantly just below the threshold of hearing. I pause in my mixing to examine a small fresco fragment that my master keeps mounted on the wall, a piece of plaster bearing the faded image of an angel's wing rescued from a demolished church. The pigments used in its creation are the same I work with now: ultramarine for the celestial blue of the feathers, vermilion for the warm shadows where wing meets body, white lead for the highlights that suggest divine radiance. Yet something in the handling speaks of a master's touch, a confidence born of absolute understanding. See how he uses the ultramarine, my master had told me when I first examined this fragment. Not as decoration, but as truth. The blue doesn't merely represent the wing, it is the wing, transformed through skill into something more real than reality itself.
I study the fragment now with eyes educated by months of preparation, seeing details that were invisible to me before. The way the blue shifts subtly from intense to pale, suggesting the complex structure of feathers without depicting every individual barb. The manner in which the vermilion shadows anchor the wing to the body while simultaneously suggesting its capacity for flight. The precise placement of white highlights that make the entire wing seem to glow with inner light. This is what we strive for in every mixture, every brushstroke, not mere representation, but transformation, the elevation of pigment into poetry, of craft into revelation. The masters who came before us understood that painting is not about copying the visible world, but about making the invisible visible, about giving form to the formless, about translating divine vision into human language. Giovanni Gaddi approaches with a question about the green he is mixing, but I can see in his eyes that he is really asking something deeper. How does one learn to see as the masters saw? To understand color not just as decoration, but as meaning itself. I set aside my own work to examine his mixture, seeing in it the same struggles I faced at his age, the same desperate desire to understand secrets that seem always just beyond reach. The masters didn't see green, I tell him, holding his mixture up to the light. They saw the life force that makes leaves grow, the divine energy that transforms earth into living beauty. Your green is technically correct, but it speaks only of pigment, not of life. Try again, but this time think not of the color you want to create, but of the miracle you want to represent. He returns to his work with renewed purpose, and I see in his movements something of the dedication that marked the great masters. Perhaps he too will one day stand in this room, teaching apprentices of his own, passing forward the accumulated wisdom of generations. The thought fills me with a strange mixture of pride and melancholy. Pride in being part of this great chain of knowledge, melancholy at the recognition that my own time as student is drawing to a close. The morning light continues its subtle evolution, and with it comes a deepening of my understanding. I see now why the masters insisted on beginning work at dawn, why they structured their entire lives around the rhythm of natural illumination. In this perfect light, colors reveal not just their surface appearance, but their essential nature, their capacity to carry meaning beyond mere representation. I return to my own palette, making final adjustments to mixtures that must serve not just today's work, but the eternal vision they will help to realize. Each color must be perfect, for it will outlive me, outlive my children, perhaps outlive the very civilization that created it. In centuries to come, viewers will stand before paintings created with these pigments and feel the same sense of wonder that fills me now, the same recognition that they are witnessing something that transcends the merely human.
The sounds of Florence awakening drift through the windows as the city stirs to life beyond our sanctuary of color and light. Cartwheels rumble over cobblestones, merchants call their morning greetings, and somewhere in the distance the bells of Santo Spirito chime the hour. But it is another sound that draws my attention, the distinctive cry of Ahmed the Moor, whose voice carries the promise of treasures from lands beyond the horizon. Pigmenti! Pigmenti preziosi! His call echoes through the narrow streets, and I feel my pulse quicken with anticipation. Ahmed arrives in Florence only twice each year, his pack animals laden with materials that cannot be found anywhere else in Tuscany. He is one of the last of the great pigment merchants, a man who has walked the trade routes from Byzantium to Baghdad, who knows the secret sources of the finest colors, who can distinguish between genuine ultramarine and the clever forgeries that flood the markets. I set aside my morning's work and make my way to the window, peering down into the street where Ahmed's small caravan has come to rest. 3 mules stand patiently in the morning sun, their panniers bulging with carefully wrapped packages. The merchant himself cuts a distinctive figure, tall and lean, his dark skin weathered by years of desert travel, his eyes holding the wisdom of one who has seen the world's hidden corners. Maestro, Giovannino whispers beside me. Shall I go down to see what he brings? I shake my head. Ahmed's visit is too important to delegate to an apprentice, no matter how promising. The materials he carries can make the difference between a painting that merely pleases and one that transcends, between colors that fade with time and those that burn with eternal fire. This is a negotiation that requires experience, knowledge, and the ability to read the subtle signs that separate the genuine from the counterfeit. I descend the narrow stairs to the street, my leather purse heavy with the coins I have been saving for just such an opportunity. Ahmed greets me with the elaborate courtesy of his people, his hands pressed together in a gesture of respect that acknowledges our long relationship. We have done business for nearly a decade, and he knows that I am one of the few buyers in Florence who can truly appreciate the quality of his finest materials. "My friend," he says in his accented Italian, "I bring you wonders from the ends of the earth. Lapis lazuli from the mountains of Badakhshan, so pure it seems to hold captured sky. Cinnabar from the mines of Almaden, red as the blood of martyrs. Orpiment from the deserts of Persia, yellow as the sun at noon."
He unwraps his treasures with the ceremony they deserve, each package revealing colors that seem to glow with inner light. The lapis lazuli is indeed exceptional, deep blue shot through with veins of gold, each piece carefully selected for its purity and intensity. I hold a fragment up to the morning light, watching as it seems to pulse with celestial fire. This stone, Ahmed tells me, his voice dropping to a whisper, was blessed by the monks of a mountain monastery. They say it carries the prayers of 1,000 pilgrims, that paintings made with its powder will never fade, never lose their power to inspire devotion. I smile at his salesmanship, but I cannot deny the exceptional quality of the material. This is lapis lazuli of the finest grade, worth its weight in silver, perhaps more. A single ounce will yield enough ultramarine to paint the robes of a dozen saints, to create skies that seem to open onto heaven itself. The negotiation begins in earnest, a delicate dance of offer and counteroffer that both of us understand is as much ritual as commerce. Ahmed knows the value of his materials, but he also knows that I am one of the few buyers who will use them properly, who will transform his precious stones into something worthy of their beauty. There is honor in this transaction that goes beyond mere profit. We examine each material together, the cinnabar that will become vermilion, the orpiment that will yield the purest yellow, the malachite that will create greens of impossible intensity. Ahmed shares the stories behind each treasure, the dangers faced by the miners who extracted them, the long journeys across desert and mountain, the careful selection process that ensures only the finest materials reach his customers. "This malachite," he says, unwrapping a piece of startling green beauty, "comes from a mine that the ancients believed was guarded by spirits. The miners must perform certain rituals before they can enter, must leave offerings to appease the guardians of the stone. Perhaps this is superstition, but I have never received poor quality material from this source." I examine the malachite closely, noting its rich color and fine crystalline structure. Whether or not spirits guard its source, this is indeed exceptional material, the kind that will yield green pigments of extraordinary brilliance and permanence. In the hands of a master, this stone will become the verdant landscapes of paradise, the rich robes of earthly princes, the subtle shadows that give depth to painted flesh.
The morning grows warmer as we conduct our business, but neither of us seems inclined to hurry. This is more than a commercial transaction. It is a meeting of minds that understand the true value of beauty, the importance of preserving the ancient knowledge that transforms raw materials into artistic miracles. Ahmed's stories of distant lands and exotic sources feed my imagination, while my questions about quality and application demonstrate the respect these materials deserve. Other merchants pass by, hawking their wares with loud voices and aggressive gestures, but Ahmed and I conduct our business in quiet tones, with the dignity appropriate to materials that will outlive us both. We are not merely buying and selling pigments. We are participating in a tradition that stretches back to the first human who mixed colored earth with binding medium and dared to believe that such simple materials could capture the infinite complexity of creation. The transaction complete, I return to the bottega with my precious purchases, each package wrapped in silk and handled with the care due to sacred relics. These materials will not be used immediately. They must be tested, prepared, integrated into the careful economy of the workshop. But their presence transforms the very air of the bottega, filling it with possibility, with the promise of colors yet to be born. Back in the sanctuary of the bottega, I unwrap Ahmed's treasures with the reverence of a priest handling sacred relics. Each package reveals wonders that seem to pulse with their own inner light, stones that have traveled further than most men ever will, minerals that carry within their crystalline hearts the accumulated power of geological ages. This is the raw material of miracles, the earthly substance from which divine visions will emerge. I begin with the orpiment, that golden yellow that glows like captured sunlight. The mineral sits heavy in my palm, its surface gleaming with metallic luster that seems almost alive. This is arsenic sulfide, deadly if mishandled, yet capable of producing yellows of such intensity that they seem to generate their own illumination. The ancients called it ori pigmentum, gold paint, and believed it held the power of the sun itself. The preparation of orpiment requires special care, for the dust can poison the unwary. I work slowly, methodically, grinding the mineral on a marble slab reserved exclusively for this purpose. The muller moves in careful circles, breaking down the crystalline structure grain by grain, releasing the golden essence trapped within. As I work, the powder begins to glow with that particular radiance that makes orpiment the most prized of all yellow pigments. The color that emerges is not merely yellow, but the very idea of yellow made manifest, pure, intense, unwavering in its brilliance. This is the yellow that will become the halos of saints, the golden light that streams from heaven in scenes of divine revelation, the aureate glow that surrounds the Christ child in nativity scenes. No other pigment can match its intensity, its ability to suggest the presence of the divine through color alone. Giovanni watches from his corner, his own work forgotten in fascination at the transformation taking place before his eyes.
He has seen me prepare many pigments, but orpiment is special, dangerous, expensive, and possessed of qualities that border on the magical. I can see in his eyes the same wonder I felt when I first witnessed this process, the recognition that we are participating in something that transcends mere craft. Remember, I tell him as I work, orpiment is not just a color, but a force. It demands respect, requires understanding. Mixed carelessly with other pigments, it can destroy them, turn brilliant colors into muddy failures. But used with wisdom, it can transform an entire painting, make the ordinary extraordinary, give earthly scenes the glow of paradise. The grinding continues, each pass of the muller revealing new depths of color. The orpiment powder spreads across the marble like liquid gold, so intense it almost hurts to look at directly. This is alchemy in its purest form, the transformation of base matter into something approaching the divine, the elevation of mere mineral into the substance of dreams.
As the morning progresses, I turn to other treasures from Ahmed's collection. The cinnabar yields its secrets reluctantly, requiring patient grinding to release the vermilion hidden within its crystalline structure. This red is different from any other, not the warm earthiness of ochre or the organic richness of Madder Lake, but something that seems to burn with inner fire, to pulse with the rhythm of life itself. The malachite presents its own challenges, its green beauty locked within a structure that resists easy grinding. But patience rewards the persistent, and gradually the stone yields powder of such intense green that it seems to hold within it the essence of every growing thing, every leaf that has ever turned toward the sun, every blade of grass that has ever pushed through spring earth. Each pigment requires its own approach, its own understanding. The lapis lazuli must be heated gently before grinding, its blue essence coaxed rather than forced from the stone. The railgar demands careful handling, its orange fire contained within crystals that could poison the careless. Every material tells its own story, carries its own history, requires its own particular form of respect. The bottega fills with the perfume of transformation, the sharp tang of ground minerals, the earthy scent of powdered stone, the subtle aromatics that rise from pigments as they yield their secrets. These are the incenses of our particular devotion, the sacred smells that accompany the daily miracle of turning earth into art. Marco approaches with questions about the green he has been struggling with, and I show him how the new malachite powder transforms his mixture. Where before his color was muddy and lifeless, the addition of this precious material brings immediate vitality. The green seems to breathe, to suggest not just the appearance of vegetation, but its essential nature, its connection to the divine force that animates all growing things. This is why we pay Ahmed's prices, I explain, watching Marco's eyes widen at the transformation. Any merchant can sell you green pigment, but only the finest materials can create colors that truly live. The difference between good and great lies not in technique alone, but in the quality of the materials we choose to work with.
the lesson extends beyond pigments to the larger philosophy of our craft. We are not merely decorators or illustrators, but translators, taking the raw materials of earth and transforming them into the language of heaven. Every choice we make, from the selection of stones to the preparation of binding media, affects the final result, determines whether our work will merely please or truly transcend.
As the sun climbs higher, the bottega settles into the rhythm of serious work. The morning's preparations are complete, the pigments properly ground and mixed, the colors singing in harmony on palettes that gleam like jeweled altars. The apprentices have learned through observation and practice, their own understanding deepened by witnessing the transformation of Ahmed's treasures into the substance of art. I pause to survey the morning's work. Shells filled with colors of impossible beauty, each one a small miracle of transformation, each one carrying within it the potential for transcendence. These pigments will outlive me, will carry forward the vision of masters yet unborn, will speak to viewers centuries hence in the same voice they speak to me now. This is the true alchemy of art, not the futile attempt to turn lead into gold, but the successful transformation of earth into heaven, of matter into meaning, of the temporal into the eternal. In every grain of pigment lies the possibility of miracle, the chance to make the invisible visible, to give form to the formless, to translate divine vision into human language that speaks across the centuries.
The sun has climbed to its zenith now, and with its ascent comes a subtle but crucial transformation in the quality of light that fills our bottega. What was once the golden honesty of dawn has become something harsher, more direct, less forgiving. The colors on my palette, which glowed with perfect truth in the morning's gentle illumination, now reveal different aspects of their nature, some growing more intense, others seeming to fade, all of them shifting in ways that would deceive the unwary. I pause in my work to observe this daily metamorphosis, this reminder of why the masters of old structured their entire lives around the rhythm of natural light. The flesh tone I mixed with such care in the dawn's clarity now appears too warm, too red, as if fever burns beneath the painted skin. The ultramarine that seemed to hold captured sky in the morning light now looks flat, earthbound, stripped of its celestial quality by the sun's harsh honesty. This is the great deception that awaits the careless artist, the belief that light is constant, that colors mixed in one illumination will serve equally well in another. I have seen promising apprentices ruin months of work by trusting the midday sun, by believing that its brightness reveals truth rather than distortion. The noon light lies as surely as candlelight, but its lies are different, more subtle, harder to detect until it is too late. Giovannino approaches with a mixture he has been working on, his young face bright with pride at what he believes is a perfect match for the sky in our master's latest commission. but I can see immediately that he has fallen victim to the changing light, that his blue was mixed under the sun's current harsh glare, rather than in the honest illumination of morning. What appears correct now will look garish and artificial when viewed in the gentle light for which it is intended. The light has changed, I tell him gently, watching as understanding dawns in his eyes. What you see now is not what you saw an hour ago, not what viewers will see when they stand before the finished painting in the soft light of a chapel. You must learn to see not just with your eyes, but with your memory, to hold the true color in your mind even when the light conspires to deceive you. He nods, but I can see the frustration in his expression. This is one of the hardest lessons for young artists to master, the understanding that light is not neutral, that it colors everything it touches, and that the artist must learn to compensate for its variations if the work is to maintain its integrity across different viewing conditions.
I demonstrate by holding up samples of the same pigment mixture under different qualities of light, near the window where the harsh sun strikes directly, in the shadowed corner where reflected light provides gentler illumination, beside the oil lamp where artificial light casts its own particular spell. Each location reveals different aspects of the color, different truths and different lies, all of them partial, all of them requiring interpretation by an educated eye. This is why we begin before dawn, I explain, moving the samples through different lighting conditions. In that perfect hour, colors show their essential nature, their true character. As the day progresses, we must remember that truth, hold it in our minds like a sacred flame, never allowing the changing light to lead us astray. The lesson extends beyond mere technique to the deeper philosophy of our craft. We paint not what we see in any single moment, but what we know to be true across all moments. Not the temporary appearance, but the eternal reality that lies beneath surface variations. The master artist learns to see through light's deceptions, to perceive the constant truth that underlies the shifting appearances. Marco joins us, bringing his own questions about color matching, and soon we have gathered a small group around the demonstration. The other apprentices watch intently as I show them how the same mixture can appear completely different under various lighting conditions, how the unwary artist can be led astray by trusting too completely in what the eye reports. Remember, I tell them, light is both our greatest ally and our most dangerous enemy. In the morning, it reveals truth. At midday, it distorts. In the evening, it flatters. At night, it lies outright. The wise artist learns to read these moods, to understand what each quality of light can and cannot show, to work with illumination rather than being enslaved by it. The afternoon stretches ahead, and with it comes the need to adapt our working methods to the changing conditions. Colors that were mixed in morning truth must now be adjusted for the harsher realities of midday light. Mixtures that appeared perfect in dawn's gentle glow may need subtle modifications to maintain their integrity as the sun climbs higher.
I return to my palette, making the subtle adjustments that experience has taught me are necessary as the light evolves. A touch more yellow in the flesh tone to compensate for the sun's harsh glare. A whisper of white in the ultramarine to restore the luminosity that the direct light has stolen. Each modification is small, almost imperceptible, but together they maintain the integrity of the original vision. The apprentices watch and learn, their own understanding deepened by witnessing this process of constant adaptation. They are beginning to grasp one of the fundamental truths of our craft, that painting is not a single act, but a continuous process of adjustment and refinement, a dialogue between artist and material that continues throughout the creation of each work. As the sun reaches its peak, I feel a familiar mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. The morning's work is complete, the pigments properly prepared and adjusted for the changing light. But this is not an ending, but a beginning, the moment when preparation transforms into creation, when the carefully mixed colors will finally serve their ultimate purpose in bringing vision to visible form. The light may change, may deceive, may challenge our understanding, but the colors we have prepared with such care will endure. They carry within them the truth of the morning's perfect illumination, the wisdom of generations of masters, the accumulated knowledge of countless hours spent in dialogue with pigment and light. In them lies the power to transcend the temporary, to speak truths that outlast the shifting conditions of their creation. As the afternoon light settles into its steady rhythm, I find myself drawn into contemplation of the deeper mysteries that surround our craft. Each grain of pigment on my palette carries within it not just color, but history, the accumulated wisdom of countless generations who have sought to capture the ineffable through the marriage of earth and vision. In the vermilion that glows like liquid fire, I see the hands of Byzantine masters who first learned to coax such intensity from cinnabar. In the ultramarine that holds captured sky, I feel the presence of medieval monks who ground lapis lazuli in monastery workshops, believing they were preparing the very substance of heaven. The knowledge we practice here is older than Florence itself, older than the Roman roads that brought the first pigment merchants to these hills. It stretches back through time like an unbroken chain, each link forged by artists who understood that they were not merely decorators, but custodians of something sacred. The techniques I teach Giovannino were taught to me by my master, who learned them from his master, who received them from another in an unbroken lineage that reaches back to the first human who mixed colored earth with binding medium and dared to believe that such humble materials could capture the divine. There is something profoundly moving about this continuity, this sense of participating in a conversation that began in caves and will continue long after these walls have crumbled to dust. Every time I grind pigment on marble, I join my voice to a chorus that has been singing for millennia. Every mixture I prepare adds another verse to an epic poem written in color and light, a story that tells itself through the accumulated efforts of countless anonymous hands. Giovannino approaches with a question about the green he has been struggling with, but I can see in his eyes that he is really asking something deeper. How does one learn to hear the whispers of the past, to understand the secrets that seem to hover just beyond the reach of conscious knowledge? I set aside my own work to examine his mixture, seeing in it not just technical problems, but the eternal struggle of the apprentice to connect with the deeper mysteries of the craft. "Listen," I tell him, holding his mixture up to the changing light. "Not with your ears, but with your hands, your eyes, your heart. The pigments want to tell you their secrets, but they speak in a language older than words. You must learn to feel their moods, to sense their preferences, to understand that each color has its own personality, its own desires, its own gifts to offer." He nods, but I can see the confusion in his expression. This is the hardest part of teaching, trying to convey knowledge that cannot be spoken, wisdom that must be felt rather than understood, truths that reveal themselves only through patient practice and quiet attention. The masters of old knew this, which is why they structured their workshops as they did, surrounding apprentices with the daily rhythms of the craft, until the knowledge seeped into their bones like water into thirsty earth. The afternoon air grows thick with the accumulated perfume of our work. The earthy scent of ground minerals, the sharp tang of binding media, the subtle aromatics that rise from pigments as they yield their secrets. These smells carry their own messages, their own memories. Sometimes I catch a whiff of something that transports me instantly to my own apprenticeship, to mornings when I stood where Giovannino stands now, struggling to understand mysteries that seemed always just beyond my grasp. Marco joins us, bringing his own questions and observations, and soon we have gathered around the work table in one of those spontaneous moments of teaching that cannot be planned or forced. These are the times when real learning happens, when the formal structure of master and apprentice dissolves into something more fluid, more organic, more true to the collaborative nature of our craft. I find myself speaking of things I rarely put into words. The way certain pigments seem to sing when properly prepared. The almost mystical moment when a mixture achieves perfect balance. The sense of communion with past masters that comes in the quiet hours of grinding and mixing. The apprentices listen with the intensity of acolytes receiving sacred instruction, understanding perhaps that they are hearing not just technical advice, but something approaching revelation. The ancients believed I tell them, that each pigment contained a spirit, a living essence that could be awakened through proper preparation and respectful handling. Perhaps this is superstition, but I have felt something like it in my own work. Moments when the colors seem to take on lives of their own, when the mixing becomes not just combination, but transformation, when the humble materials of earth become something approaching the divine. The words hang in the air like incense, and for a moment the bottega feels less like a workshop than a temple, a sacred space where the boundaries between the material and spiritual worlds grow thin. This is what the masters understood, that art is not just craft but prayer, not just technique but devotion, not just skill but service to something greater than ourselves.
The light continues its subtle evolution as we work, and with it comes a deepening of understanding. I see now why the old masters insisted on beginning each day with the preparation of pigments, why they treated these humble materials with such reverence, why they understood that the quality of the colors would determine the quality of the final work. In every grain of properly prepared pigment lies the potential for transcendence, the possibility of creating something that speaks across centuries, that touches hearts not yet born, that carries forward the accumulated wisdom of all who have practiced this ancient craft. As the afternoon wears on, I feel the presence of those who will come after us, as surely as I feel the presence of those who came before. Somewhere in the future, other apprentices will stand in workshops like this one, grinding pigments with the same care, learning the same lessons, struggling with the same mysteries. They will carry forward what we teach them, add their own discoveries to the common treasury, pass on to their own students the accumulated wisdom of generations. This is the true immortality of art, not the survival of individual works, but the continuity of knowledge, the unbroken chain of understanding that connects past to future through the eternal present of creation. In every carefully prepared pigment, in every patient lesson, in every moment of quiet communion with the materials of our craft, we participate in something larger than ourselves, something that transcends the boundaries of individual life and speaks to the deepest aspirations of the human spirit.
The afternoon light begins its gentle retreat, growing softer, more forgiving, as if the harsh honesty of midday is giving way to something more contemplative, more kind. The shadows in the bottega lengthen and deepen, creating pools of quietude where the day's work settles into memory. This is the hour of reflection, when the urgent business of preparation gives way to something more meditative, more eternal. I set aside my tools with the careful deliberation of one completing a sacred ritual. The muller finds its place beside the marble slab, still warm from the day's grinding. The palette knives rest in their appointed positions, their blades clean and bright, ready for tomorrow's work.
Each shell holds its treasure of prepared pigment, the colors glowing softly in the changing light like jewels in a reliquary. The apprentices move through their own closing rituals, cleaning brushes with the patience of monks tending prayer beads, organizing materials with the reverence due to sacred objects, preparing the workspace for the night's rest and tomorrow's renewal. There is something deeply satisfying about these end-of-day ceremonies, this sense of completion that comes not from finishing, but from having participated fully in the eternal cycle of preparation and creation. Giovannino approaches with his final mixture of the day, a blue that has cost him hours of patient adjustment, but now glows with something approaching perfection. I examine it in the softening light, seeing not just technical competence, but the first stirrings of true understanding. The boy is beginning to hear what the pigments whisper, to feel their moods and preferences, to participate in the ancient dialogue between artist and material. Tomorrow, I tell him, we will begin to use these colors, to see them transformed from potential into reality. But remember what you have learned today, that the preparation is as important as the application, that the quality of the pigment determines the quality of the painting, that every grain of color carries within it the accumulated wisdom of all who have worked with it before. He nods, his young face serious with the weight of responsibility. I see in his expression something of my own younger self, the same mixture of excitement and trepidation that comes with approaching the deeper mysteries of the craft. He is ready, I think, to move beyond mere preparation into the realm of creation itself. The bottega grows quiet as the day's work draws to its close. The sounds of Florence drift through the windows, the evening bells calling the faithful to vespers, the voices of merchants closing their shops, the clip-clop of horses carrying their riders home through the narrow streets. But these sounds feel distant, muffled, as if the workshop exists in its own bubble of concentrated time and space.
I walk among the prepared pigments, examining each one in the gentle light of late afternoon. The ochre glows with warm earthiness, ready to become the flesh of saints and angels. The vermilion burns with inner fire, prepared to suggest the divine love that animates all creation. The ultramarine holds captured sky, waiting to clothe the Virgin in celestial glory. Each color is perfect in its own way, each one a small miracle of transformation, each one carrying within it the potential for transcendence. The light continues its subtle evolution, growing ever softer, ever more forgiving. This is the light that flatters, that makes everything appear more beautiful than it truly is, that whispers promises of perfection that the harsh honesty of morning will reveal as gentle deceptions. But there is value in this kindness, this daily gift of beauty that helps us remember why we do this work, why we dedicate our lives to the pursuit of something that exists at the intersection of craft and miracle. As the sun sinks lower, the bottega fills with a golden haze that seems to emanate not from the windows, but from the pigments themselves, as if the accumulated colors have begun to glow with their own inner light. This is the magic hour, when the boundary between the material and spiritual worlds grows thin, when the humble materials of earth seem to reveal their divine potential. I find myself thinking of all the paintings that will emerge from today's preparations, all the visions that will be made visible through these carefully mixed colors. Somewhere in the future, viewers will stand before works created with these pigments and feel their hearts lifted, their spirits touched by beauty that speaks across the centuries. They will not know of the hours spent in preparation, the patient grinding and mixing, the careful attention to light and proportion, but they will feel the result. Colors that live and breathe, that carry within them the accumulated wisdom of generations, that transform mere pigment into the substance of dreams. The apprentices begin to drift away as the light fades, their day's work complete, their understanding deepened by another day's participation in the ancient mysteries of color and light. They carry with them not just technical knowledge, but something more precious, the sense of belonging to something larger than themselves, of participating in a tradition that stretches back through time and forward into an uncertain but hopeful future.
I remain alone in the gathering dusk, surrounded by the fruits of the day's labor. The pigments rest in their shells like sleeping spirits, ready to awaken at tomorrow's touch and transform into something greater than the sum of their earthly parts. In their quiet presence, I feel the weight and wonder of our calling, to serve as bridges between the visible and invisible worlds, to translate divine vision into human language, to make the eternal momentarily visible through the marriage of skill and inspiration. The last light fades from the windows, and I light a single candle to guide my final preparations for the night. In its gentle glow, the pigments seem to pulse with quiet life, as if they dream of the paintings they will become, the visions they will help to realize, the hearts they will touch across the vast expanse of time. This is the hour of possibility, when today's work settles into memory and tomorrow's potential begins to stir. In the silence of the bottega, surrounded by colors that hold within them the promise of miracles, I feel the presence of all who have practiced this craft before me, and all who will practice after I am gone. We are links in a golden chain that stretches across centuries, each of us adding our own small contribution to the great work of making the invisible visible, of giving form to dreams, of translating the language of heaven into words that earthbound eyes can read. Good night, traveler of time. May your dreams carry echoes of the voices we have borrowed today, and may tomorrow find you rested in the gentle footprints we have left in the infinite sand of history.
The candle flame dances in the stillness, casting gentle shadows that seem to breathe life into the painted saints watching from the walls. The bottega has settled into its evening quietude, that sacred hour when the day's urgent work dissolves into something softer, more eternal. The pigments rest in their shells like sleeping children, each one holding within its crystalline heart the dreams of tomorrow's paintings. I move through this familiar space with the slow deliberation of one completing a prayer, my footsteps soft on the worn wooden floors that have supported generations of artists. The marble slab gleams in the candlelight, its surface bearing the subtle impressions left by countless mullers, the accumulated weight of centuries pressing color into submission. Tomorrow it will sing again with the rhythm of preparation, but tonight it rests, patient and eternal as the mountains from which it was carved. The shells of pigment catch the flickering light, each one a small universe of possibility. The ultramarine seems to hold captured starlight, deep blue shot through with golden reflections that dance like distant suns. The vermilion glows with the warmth of banked coals, ready to burst into flame at the first touch of brush to panel. The ochre rests quiet and steady, humble as earth, yet holding within its modest brown the potential to become the flesh of angels. Outside, Florence sleeps, beneath a canopy of stars that have watched over this city since before the first stone was laid, before the first artist mixed pigment with binding medium and dared to believe that colored earth could capture the divine. The narrow streets hold the silence of night, broken only by the distant sound of water flowing through ancient channels, carrying away the day's concerns and preparing the city for tomorrow's renewal. I extinguish the candle with a gentle breath, and darkness settles over the bottega like a benediction. But it is not true darkness. The pigments seem to glow with their own inner light, as if they have absorbed the day's illumination and now release it slowly, like stones that have basked in sunlight and continue to radiate warmth long after the sun has set. In this gentle darkness, I feel the presence of all who have worked in this space before me, their spirits lingering like the perfume of roses long after the flowers have faded. They are here in the knowledge that flows through my hands, in the techniques that have been passed down through generations, in the understanding that what we do here matters in ways that extend far beyond the boundaries of this single room.
The night air carries the scent of jasmine from hidden gardens, mixing with the lingering aromatics of the day's work. Linseed oil and ground minerals, egg tempera and pine resin, the accumulated perfume of creation itself. These smells will fade with time, but the colors we have prepared will endure, carrying forward into an uncertain future the accumulated wisdom of all who have practiced this ancient craft. Tomorrow the sun will rise again over the terracotta roofs of Florence, and with it will come another day of preparation, another cycle of grinding and mixing, another opportunity to participate in the eternal dialogue between vision and reality. The apprentices will return, their young faces bright with eagerness to learn, to grow, to add their own voices to the great chorus of creation that has been singing since the first human looked at the world and felt the need to capture its beauty in permanent form. But that is tomorrow's story. Tonight belongs to silence, to reflection, to the quiet satisfaction that comes from work well done and knowledge faithfully transmitted. In the darkness of the bottega, surrounded by colors that dream of the paintings they will become, I feel the weight and wonder of our calling to serve as custodians of beauty, as bridges between the temporal and eternal, as humble servants of something infinitely greater than ourselves. The pigments rest, patient and ready. The tools wait in their appointed places. The knowledge sleeps in willing hands, ready to awaken at tomorrow's touch. And in the gentle darkness, time moves differently, flowing like honey, carrying us forward on currents of accumulated wisdom toward a future bright with possibility. Sleep comes slowly, sweetly, like pigment settling into binding medium, like color finding its perfect balance, like the eternal dance of light and shadow that plays across the walls of memory. In dreams I see paintings yet to be born, visions waiting to be made visible, colors that will speak across centuries in voices we are only beginning to understand. The bottega breathes quietly in the darkness, holding within its ancient walls the accumulated dreams of generations, the patient hope of all who have ever believed that beauty matters, that art endures, that the careful preparation of humble materials can somehow touch the infinite and make it momentarily visible to mortal eyes. Good night, traveler of time. May your dreams carry echoes of the voices we have borrowed today, and may tomorrow find you rested in the gentle footprints we have left in the infinite sand of history.